Good evening, Dr. Carmen Bryant, Psychological Health Consultants and Services, and Redefining Yourself. This is a program developed for women that are in making a decision to leave or are recovering from domestic violence, specifically narcissist abuse. I know on Friday we spoke, I spoke to you on Friday, and I'm going to continue teaching about narcissist abuse from the diagnostic manual. Tonight I just wanted to come in real quick. First of all, hopefully you had a wonderful weekend. I just wanted to come on before I retired for the evening and just quickly speak about learned helplessness. I wanted to take you through a process to show you, I wanted to make you think. A lot of times, victims of domestic violence have not been provided with information to help them understand the situation that they're in. Most of the time, they blame themselves, they feel helpless, and they deal with a lot of shame. Males and females, I do recognize males and females, they both go through the same thing because women can be just as vicious and facetious as our male counterparts. However, this program was developed with women in mind, and so I do address women more than I address men, but I do identify that men also go through domestic violence just like women do, and especially narcissist abuse. So this evening I just wanted to come on real quick just to talk about learned helplessness. First of all, I want to take you through steps, because if I teach you how you got where you got to, it will also help to redefine, first of all, what you think about yourself, but also recondition you or realign you to think differently about your situation. And what most victims don't understand is how powerful they really are. When you're dealing with domestic violence and you're dealing with power and control, the person that appears to be in control is actually not in control. The person that they're trying to control is actually the person that's in power. There's something about you, especially for a narcissist, that they found powerful about you. But they will take your strength and reverse it to make you think those are your weaknesses. But anytime a person wants to impose their will, their thoughts, or to control you, then they're the person that's actually the weak person. Anyone that has to abuse another person, anyone that has to mistreat another person or force them under their control is actually the person that is powerless, and the person that they're trying to control is the one that has power. So I really want you to understand how much power you have, especially you ladies. You have more power than you think you have, but I'm going to help recondition your mind, redefine who you are. So first of all, let's talk about classical conditioning. So classical conditioning, if any of you have heard of Ivan Pavlov. Pavlov was the theory of the salivating dog, where he did experiments with dogs, with the classical conditioning. And what he did was he paired a potent stimulus, which was food, and then he took a neutral stimulus, which was a bell, and it stimulated, when he put those two together, it actually stimulated or elicited a physiological response, which was salivation. So he put the dog, he had a dog, and what he did was he would ring a bell. So the bell was the neutral stimulus. And when he rang the bell, he would bring food to the dog, which was the potent stimulus, and it elicited a response, which was salivation. Later on, he did it over and over again to condition the dog to know that when the bell was rung, food would come, and so he would salivate, to a point where he would ring the bell and the dog would begin salivating before the food would come out. So that is the basic learning process of classical conditioning. That was a basic learning process in the world of psychology. Now, the next thing I wanted to tell you about was learned helplessness. So learned helplessness, you had two psychologists that was doing research on dogs. Again, one by the name of Martin Seligman, and the other one Stephen Mayer. And what they did was I'm not going to go like verbatim what it says on here. I'm trying to give you the basic concept of what they did. They did experiment with dogs, and they put these dogs in these boxes that had, I think, like 2 tiers and an electric floor. And what they would do was they would turn on the electric floor, and the dog, by instinct, obviously jumped over the barrier to get out of the box. What they found is there were dogs that when they turned on the electric floor. They were doing these experiments with the dogs, but they did not give them an opportunity to escape. And so what happened is they noticed that whenever they would have these dogs, they put these groups of dogs together. Some of them had a means of escape. The other ones did not have a means of escape. The ones that had a means of escape would have tried to escape out of the box. The ones that had been trained or had been conditioned to when they turned on the electric floor and they had no escape, they just took it. They didn't fight. They didn't do anything. They just stood there helplessly because they realized that they had no escape. They had no hope of getting away from that thing that was causing them pain. So it was almost like a human kind of numbed themselves and just accepted their fate. So let me tell you another one. For example, the elephants. When the trainers would get the elephants were babies. They would tie a rope on their foot and then they would tie them up to a post. And so as a baby, the baby would struggle for hours or sometimes days until the baby elephant would just wear himself out to a point where he stopped struggling. He would just accept that he had limited range of motions, that he couldn't escape from that pole, to a point where when the elephant grew large, and we know large elephants are very powerful, that they wouldn't even struggle with this pole. They even took the chains off of the elephants or had them on, but the elephant is strong enough to break the chains. But because of the fact that he grew up with that condition, I mean, he remembered what happened to him in youth, and he was trained to believe that he had no means of escaping his fate or getting out of that rope. Now, I said all that to say this. In situations of domestic violence, your abuser or the abuser has conditioned the victim or the survivor to believe that there is no escape from the situation, that this is their fate. And what you'll find, one of the things that I hate when I hear people say, I don't understand, why didn't you just leave? Well, if a person has been conditioned for a long period of time, they have learned helplessness. They have learned to be helpless because there has never been an opportunity to escape. If the abuser has controlled her and she's never gotten any information, she's never talked to anyone to tell her or to teach her that what was happening to her was wrong, or even to a point where he has instilled enough fear in her, whether it's physical abuse, threats of abuse on their children, or economic abuse. If the abuser has conditioned the victim or the survivor long enough, when the ability to escape is there, like the elephant, they won't even take that. Some abusers even have, they kind of brainwash. They manipulate and brainwash, and to have them believe that even if you escape, I will still find you, to instill fear. Remember, that was something that we talked about before in domestic violence, to instill fear. But to condition them to a point where they feel helpless. And the victim really doesn't understand how powerful they are because they may not know their resources, may not know that there are places they can escape and hide. There are main agencies out there that are set up for those women that are trying to escape. But a lot of times, and I have met people like this before, where they have been at a young age, may have been an older man that has convinced or has started dating a younger girl, but has conditioned her to believe that I am everything that you need, I supply everything. And remember, economic abuse, physical abuse, limiting her social interactions everywhere that she needs to go. He transports her, he watches her call, he monitors and everything in her life, where she never has the opportunity to escape because he's always there, always watching her, always making her believe that wherever you go, I'm always watching you. So she has been conditioned to believe that there is no hope, so she stops fighting. So I wanted to introduce that to you because one of the things I also encourage when you're talking to women, first of all, you never know who's in a domestic violence situation. You never know who is battered. You never know who is, and for one woman to say, girl, I would never, that a never, I would never, that's because you never have. For women that have escaped from or may still be in, sometimes they're hard to recognize as well, because they can be people just like you and I, powerful women, people in power, women in power, lawyers, doctors, pastors, first ladies, military service members, people in high positions that you wouldn't assume would be in a domestic violence situation. But you have to remember that domestic violence is shrouded in secrecy. It's also shrouded in shame, embarrassment, especially when you have women that are in leadership, and people admire them and they're powerful. A lot of times people don't know that they're going back home to a domestic violent or a violent situation. Some of them may not have bruises on their faces. The violator or the abuser has learned not to hit her in her facial area for it to be seen, or there are other things that person, or the abuser would do. So never tell a woman, girl, I would never, or it couldn't have been me, because really what you're doing is you're re-victimizing her, but you're making her feel like it's her fault and that she should be able to prevent what's happening to her. And sometimes that's not the case. One thing that I do say is not all men that have been abused become abusers, but most abusers have been abused, and it is also a learned behavior. For the victim, a lot of times they come from homes where they have witnessed abuse, and this was their environment. And so they have learned this is just how it is. Even in homes with high stress, high levels of stress, like I said, it applies to women as well, because I have met very abusive, disrespectful women. And when I say very abusive, disrespectful, it really turns me off to see women just mishandle men or publicly humiliate men. If you have to publicly humiliate, or if you have to disrespect or dishonor a man, then you shouldn't be with one at this particular time until you come to counseling and get some help for yourself. So I do acknowledge the fact that I have witnessed it, I have seen it, and I was not pleased with it either. I'm not a man hater, but I do support those men that do try to do their best and are respectful. But a lot of times those men that have become abusers give, all men a bad name. And it's almost a general statement, give men a bad name. But then when you come from, for example, women who come from households that are matriarchal, I think that's a word, but are female dominant, a lot of times you're also, and I've witnessed this as well, a lot of times you're dealing with a lot of women who have been hurt and abused and misused, and it's generational. And so they're teaching their daughters how to be angry and how to be bitter, and that a man is not this and a man is not that, but you're setting them up, because not every man is like that. Sometimes you set them up to be abused. If a woman has never had a man in her home, or if a woman has never heard a man's voice, or been raised by a father or father figures, a lot of times a woman will create this image in her head of what a husband is supposed to look like, or this is what a marriage is supposed to be like, because they've never had an example of relationships. And so they go into relationships with these expectations and unrealistic expectations of a man they have drawn up in their head. And now what has happened is this man has to live up to an image in her head that he knows nothing about. When you misunderstand something, it's inevitable that you abuse it, So like I said, there is history. I'm not saying that it is right for a woman to be abused, but what I'm saying is that sometimes they're coming out of environments where the women have been abused time and time again. Is almost generational. And so I say that because even in the mental health field, or let's say in the medical field, if you have high blood pressure, if you have heart condition, if you have diabetes, they're normally going to ask you if anybody in your family has had cancer, diabetes, because it becomes genetic, or it's genetic, it's within the family. There's a family history of, is there a family history of breast cancer? Is there a family history of high blood pressure? Or 9 times out of 10 is generational. And someone's gonna, diabetes, someone's gonna have it. So think about it as well, that when women come out of households where they have witnessed domestic violence and abuse, normally they go back into the environment they came out of. That is their norm. That's all they know. And so they go back into an environment that is abusive. Is it right? Absolutely not. But they've never been taught anything else. They've never been taught, sometimes about us, when it comes to narcissists, get to a narcissist, when it comes to a narcissist looks for women that have a weakness. And let me explain what I'm talking about. Normally that woman may be in a position of power. The woman has a powerful skill sets, holds a powerful position, has money, but there's something about her heart, there's something about her character that he can almost sense that she is weak in certain places. We call it weak. When I say weak, a broken heart, a dysfunctional family, past abuse. And what happens is, ladies, we talk too much sometimes. And so when a man, when we're courting, sometimes we tell all our business. And when I say we tell all our business, I don't like this. I came from a family like this. I watched this abuse, and one thing I don't like. And now in a normal conversation, if we're trying to get to know each other, that's teaching me how to respect you, some of your boundaries. When you're dealing with a narcissist, the narcissist is taking that information and he's trying to figure out your weaknesses and what out of your weaknesses will he use to control you. Example, if you tell a narcissist, one thing that I don't like, or one of the many things that you don't like is, I don't like to be left alone. I really want a man that wants to communicate. I've never really been loved before. He's going to be everything that you say that you want. He may not be that person, but he's a chameleon. And so he's going to become everything you want him to be. And it's a matter of control, because he's trying to reel you in. So he's trying to reel you in by taking what you're saying not as a respect and rapport building. He's taking that as a weakness. So in the future, he'll know how to punish you. In order to get control over you, or to get you to do what he wants you to do, he knows now all I have to do is withdraw my love from you, ignore you. Anything that you say that you don't like, he'll pull it away in order to reel you back in. And out of habit, you're like, I don't understand. You're not talking to me. You'll pursue like, what's wrong? What's wrong? You see, what's wrong? Why are you not talking to me? I don't get it. Do you still love me? And I don't. But they use that to get control over you. And they do it because they're conditioning you. They're conditioning you. They're using that to condition you. They're using that to teach you how to be helpless. They're teaching you how this learned helplessness. They're conditioning you. That's what they're doing to maintain control over you. The sad thing about it is to them it's a game, and to women it's life, and it's unfair, because we go into relationships. Most of us go into relationships with the hopes of, loving and security, and, what we look for in relationships, communication, I want a family. They don't go into it for that. They go into it for the purpose of supply. You supply a need for them. And another thing pay attention to is that they'll take your strengths and they'll reverse it and hold it against you as if it's a weakness. So many things that they're saying to you, they take your strengths and reverse it to make it sound like those are your weaknesses. A narcissist, or abuser in general, usually has has a low self-esteem and self-worth about them. They tend to project themselves on people. They project themselves especially on the people that they are connected to. So they project what they say about you is what they feel about themselves. And what they hold against you is probably your PowerPoints or your strengths. when I developed redefining yourself, I did that because an abuser has defined you, and you're living off of the words and the definitions of your abuser, whether it was parents in a household where there was domestic violence, close friends, family members, or your lovers or husbands or ex-husbands, boyfriends, whomever. But the words, you're living off of words from someone else. They have defined you, and you're living off of the definition of someone else. Now it's time for you to go back and redefine yourself. Redefine yourself and recover from the domestic violence, which for many women takes a long time, takes a while to go back and do, because you're having, remember, classical conditioning and learned helplessness. That takes a while to relearn new habits. New habits can also be to learn something new, to learn a new habit, to learn a new way of thinking often becomes very uncomfortable, and it's also very painful because it's unfamiliar as well. To learn that you're actually more powerful than you thought you were is also a new freedom that sometimes women are not accustomed to, or to break out of being a hostage, or break out of prison, or to break out of bondage. What do you do with your newfound freedom? Sometimes people go from one extreme to the other, from passive to over aggressive, trying to find that happy medium, But I just wanted to bring something this evening and just talk to you a little while, just to talk about classical conditioning and learned helplessness. And this is just in our journey and learning about narcissist abuse. Hopefully this helped. Thanks for tuning in. Thank you for your support. And I hope you guys have a nice evening. I hope you start your weekend off well. And I will be back. Thank you.